are coming on the air tonight with the anguish and the resolve in Israel, the crisis building in Gaza, and the new warnings about a potential day of violence tomorrow. Tanks gathering on the border now with Gaza. New video of Israeli troops raiding buildings after that attack. We're live in the region. Plus, questions of accountability as to how Hamas managed to execute such a shocking attack. A closer look at Israel's world-renowned intelligence service in our breakdown and what a top military official is saying about why Israel didn't see this coming. Then here at home, those new concerns about that Friday the 13th call to action by Hamas backers, how the biggest cities in this country are getting prepared as a precaution, and the warning for Elon Musk as Europe opens an investigation into war, misinformation, and violence on X. What that means for a bunch of social media platforms at a time when real-time, real information is key. And you're looking at live pictures of Columbia here, closing campus today ahead of a protest against the war. The backlash and security concerns facing students later on in our show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and tonight the rage, the shock, the desperation, the next steps to try and rescue hostages being held after the devastating terror attack in Israel. And new concern about what could happen tomorrow as you are looking live now at Gaza, with Israeli forces saying it is time for war. That country shaken to its core by the horrific and graphic photos that are being released today, including images of slaughtered and burned babies. Our team on the ground caught tanks moving across the outskirts of Ashkelon today. You see it here. This is about 2 miles from the Gaza border, with the former leader of Hamas now calling on the Arab world to protest tomorrow, Friday, around the world in support of their attacks and join their fight. New body cam video into us late tonight shows Israeli special forces freeing hostages Saturday and capturing terrorists, with many Israeli families still desperate to hear any signs of life from their loved ones who are believed to have been kidnapped by Hamas.
The only thing I know for a fact is that her body isn't in the house. Other than that, we do have indications, rumors. We have strong assumptions that she is being held in Gaza. But I'm careful because I don't really know.
At the same time, Gazans are stuck in a humanitarian crisis. More than 330,000 people have had to leave their homes, food and water running out, their health system collapsing too, according to officials there, as retaliatory strikes like these hammer the Gaza Strip. Cemeteries are filling up. They're not safe to reach, so some survivors are now burying their family members next to their homes. Tonight, more than 2,800 people are dead across Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. With the Secretary of State in Israel today, the Defense Secretary will be there tomorrow as U.S. officials race to try to help free hostages and find safe passage out of Gaza for civilians there. Ali Velshi is live for us in Ashkelon, Israel. Josh Letterman is in Tel Aviv. But Ali, I want to start with you. We saw your interview there with somebody who is clinging to hope, it sounds like, that the person they love is still alive here, as we are also seeing this very active situation on the ground. Talk to us about where the fighting is happening. Do Israeli forces think Hamas attackers, those terrorists, are still inside the country alive?
Well, with the fighting is what's happening right now. We've got the Gaza border is 2 miles from where I am. It's right in that direction, and every now and then you may see an Iron Dome interception above us. There are believed to be active Hamas terrorists in the region. In fact, the IDF has not given the all clear. They have made this entire area a military zone. That said, there have been reports of gun battles and skirmishes going as recently as yesterday. There are still rockets coming in from Gaza all through Israel. We're still hearing interceptions very frequently, although tonight less so than on nights prior. However, we are hearing the jets overhead, and we are feeling the percussive booms of the missiles as they strike Gaza over there. Now, this complicates the issue of the hostages. There are about 150 families who think that they've got loved ones who are hostages. The Israeli government has confirmed to about 100 of those families that their family members were taken by Hamas. They don't know where they are. They don't know what their condition is. The man I talked to today, they got access to the mother's house at a kibbutz by the Gaza border, and her body wasn't in the house. That's the hope they're clinging to, that her body wasn't in the house. But these families of these hostages are very, very concerned that if this ground incursion, which could start any minute now, they're fully built up around the Gaza border. If that ground incursion begins, some of these families believe that compromises their ability to get their loved ones back. So they would like the government to lean more into giving them more information, having perhaps engaging in negotiations with Hamas, and then dealing with Hamas as a number 2 step. There's disagreement in Israel as to whether that's the right thing to do.
And part of that is, of course, the U.S. involvement. We know that the Secretary of State is going to be heading to Qatar tomorrow to have some of those conversations around the best way to get some of those hostages free, right?
That's right. And Qatar, of course, is sort of the headquarters of where you go to try and get hostages released. They've become that sort of mediator in the middle. He, in fact, was here, Secretary Blinken, in Israel. He has now gone to Amman, Jordan, which is another key ally in the region right next door. Amman is probably a 2-hour drive from here at the best of times. He's flown, of course, and then he's going to Qatar tomorrow to have that discussion. The other thing that the Americans have told the Israelis, despite strong support, they've sort of implied, help us help you by not making Gaza into a humanitarian catastrophe. There's no power left in Gaza. Food has stopped going in. Water has stopped going in. And over 300,000 people are now not in their homes, either because the homes are destroyed or because they're worried that they're going to be destroyed.
Gazans have been saying today that Israeli planes have been flying overhead, dropping flyers, telling them to leave their neighborhoods. Part of the issue seems to be they have nowhere else to go. They can leave their neighborhoods and head to shelters, perhaps, that are filling up incredibly quickly, but they cannot actually get out of the Gaza Strip right now. What happens? How does that move forward?
That's correct. That's the problem. And today, actually, when Secretary Blinken was asked about it, he implied that they're working on something. But the problem is the minute that ground incursion begins, Gaza City is Gaza is a small place to start with. The most populated area is Gaza City, which is right near the border. It's just if Gaza, the border is 2 miles from here, 2.5 miles from here. Gaza City is, I think, 4 miles from here. So that's the problem. Everybody then pushes south into the more desert area in the Sinai Peninsula toward the Egyptian border, which has been bombed as well. The negotiations, in theory, are with the Egyptians about what to do or creating a humanitarian corridor, but they don't seem to be moving as fast as this threat of an invasion is. The leaflets are because they can't, there's no power there. Many people's phones are not working, so they're dropping leaflets to say, we're coming to your area, get out.
Yeah. Hallie Velshi, live for us there in Ashkelon. Hallie, thank you for being there and for bringing us some of those conversations and that reporting. New tonight, we want to show you this moment. An Israeli minister face-to-face with furious Israeli survivors at a hospital. Listen to this. You hear men there angry, yelling things like resign, ask for forgiveness, take responsibility, that their friends were murdered. Just one example of what other Israelis are feeling tonight, that they were failed by the government with hundreds of civilians dead, including at that music festival Saturday where Hamas murdered more than 200 people. Our Raf Sanchez is there on the ground.
This is our first time inside the Supernova Festival since that attack in the early hours of Saturday morning. This was a place of music, a place of dancing, a place of joy, and now there is just a deathly, deathly silence here. This was one of the artistic tents at the festival. You can see people here were painting, they were expressing themselves. And this is just one of these many scenes we've seen all across southern Israel, a place that is frozen in time. We don't know the person who painted this. Are they still alive? Have they been kidnapped? Are they inside of Gaza? Over here is one of the parked cars. This symbol is spray painted by the Israeli military, and it shows that this car has been searched, that there's no explosives in it. And if you just come around, you can see, as in every one of these cars, there are the makings of everything you'd need for a fun weekend at a music festival. It looks like this person has paint, there's chocolate in there, there's Kleenex, there's extra water. If you just follow me over this way, Israeli authorities say that there were about 3,500 people at this festival, at least 260 of whom were killed in the terrorist attack. And this was really where the violence started. People were out here, they were dancing, the music was loud, but you can see in videos some of them start to realize that something is wrong, and some of them are even pointing towards the black dots on the horizon, which are the Hamas paragliders coming in. This was what was the main bar at the festival. And you can see everywhere there are just half-drunk bottles of Johnny Walker whiskey, of vodka. People were having a good time here at 6 a.m. when this murderous wave swept in. And one of the many, many painful questions is, where was the army? We were so close to the Gaza border here. This is an area that was at risk. The Israeli military, when you ask them, how is it that you were unable to protect this site, unable to protect all these different areas across southern Israel, they say clearly mistakes were made. Clearly this was a massive failure. They say there will be time after this war to answer those painful questions. But for many of the families of young people who died here, they waited day after agonizing day for news, hoping and praying that their loved ones might still be alive. And many of them found out they weren't. Back to you.
Our thanks to Raf for that reporting. Secretary of State Blinken, as we mentioned, is going to be heading to meet with the Qataris, in part to try to help figure out a way to get hostages back home in his visit to Israel, casting this war in intensely personal terms.
It's impossible for me to look at the photos of families killed, such as the mother, father, and 3 small children murdered as they sheltered in their home in kibbutz near Oz, and not think of my own children.
We know now that at least 27 Americans have been killed in the attacks by Hamas. With the White House saying today that they have no plans to send boots on the ground, troops to Israel, new troops, we should say. They are sending technical expertise to help with those hostage rescues. That's why you're seeing these discussions with U.S. officials now in talks with Egypt and Israel to also try to get safe passage for somewhere between 500 and 600 Palestinian Americans in Gaza as well. I want to bring in Josh Letterman, who's joining us now. So, Josh, we've laid out what we expect to see from the Secretary of State and, for that matter, the Defense Secretary over the next 24 hours. Can you please level set with us? Realistically, 24 hours from now, right? What kind of expectations are being set for how these discussions should go? Are we anticipating big breakthroughs? Is this about incremental steps here?
Hallie, I talked to one U.S. diplomat today who said if Secretary Blinken comes home from this trip and Israel is still only fighting on one front with the Gaza Strip, that is a win. That will be a success for them. That is a key element of these next 2 stops on this trip, both when he is in Jordan, where he's going to meet with President Abbas from the Palestinian Authority, really trying to make sure that this violence does not spiral in the West Bank, where we've seen some isolated clashes, but we haven't seen outright warfare. They want to make sure that the Palestinian Authority continues to cooperate and provide security assistance on the threats that they're seeing. And it will also be a key element of his time in Qatar, where I spoke with a Qatari source who said there's really 2 items on the agenda. One is working on these hostage release negotiations, but 2, de-escalation, particularly when it comes with other groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon that the Qataris have some influence in, trying to make sure that those groups do not enter this fight as well, because the last thing that Blinken and other U.S. officials want to see is Israel fighting not only in the Gaza Strip, but also on the border with Lebanon and Syria and in the West Bank. That would be an even broader crisis for Israel, and the hope is that this final 2 stops on this trip will be able to tamp that down, Hallie.
There's also the factor of Iran. We've talked a lot on this show and on this network about Iran's backing of Hamas over the years here, that they are a sponsor of Hamas here. There's this question that's come up here in Washington and beyond of this $6 billion that it got as part of this swap situation. It was to be released to them for humanitarian aid. There's this question of, does it get frozen? The Secretary talked about that. We've heard a lot about that from members of Congress as well. Explain why that's so important here, why that's such a piece of the leverage.
Well, he's getting criticism from the same Republicans and others who didn't like this deal to begin with, that thought it was $6 billion ransom payment for those released Americans. And so now the U.S. Is going to be freezing Iran's ability to spend that $6 billion. But this is a bit of a weird one, because the U.S. over and over in the last few days has said they don't believe Iran necessarily orchestrated this attack or was behind it beyond broader support for Hamas. So the U.S. clearly under a lot of pressure not to give a lot of money money to Iran at this very critical time, but it really raises questions about how Iran would be able to trust the U.S. in any future negotiation over the nuclear program or anything else, given that they struck a deal, $6 billion and Iranian prisoners in exchange for those released Americans. And now the U.S. appears, at least temporarily, to be backtracking on its part of the agreement. Yeah. Hallie?
Josh Letterman live for us in Tel Aviv. Josh, thank you. We've talked about how much of this war has been unprecedented, the sheer horror of it, and that includes the unprecedented number of hostages believed to be held right now by Hamas, more than 100. People like some of the ones you're seeing in these very disturbing videos. Among the hostages, Americans, it's believed that Secretary Blinken is trying to get released along with the others, with Israel clearly willing to take difficult and potentially controversial steps to try to get these hostages home. The Israeli energy minister saying essentially on X that the siege of Gaza, preventing water, food, and electricity to get through, will not stop until the kidnapped Israelis are turned over. I want to bring in former CIA official Bob Baer, who understands. I think, Bob, you have some expertise here in what this moment might be like as far as either the extraction of hostages, some sort of deal to get these hostages out. If you talk about a rescue, the logistics here are incredibly complicated. Ali Velshi was talking with us earlier about Gaza City, right? And Gaza itself is incredibly dense. It is so small and it is so packed. It is very urban here. That presents a separate series of challenges.
Well, look, the hostages, we can only guess where they are right now. And Hamas over the years, last 2 decades, has been tunneling all through Gaza. They've been tunneling under the border. They look at these hostages as extremely valuable, and they are not going to give them up easily. And they're down in those tunnels, which would be almost impossible to take without the hostages dying. The Israelis don't have maps of them. They're probably being moved around, so the intelligence is zero practically. And the only way Israel can get him back is by force, and that's a land invasion of Gaza. In order to invade Gaza and hold it and occupy it and get the hostages out, you pretty much have to flatten it, as happened today, which is a humanitarian disaster, which will have repercussions for a very, very long time. So Israel is really in a bind, and the United States has gone to gutter, who over the years has supported Hamas, has been very close. Private money has gone into Hamas. They have a certain amount of influence over Hamas to give them up. But right now, I don't see the Hamas we're talking about today, the Izzadin Qassam brigades, giving these hostages up. I just don't see it.
Well, this was my question to you, is what could the Qataris do? I mean, do you believe that they have the potential to change the trajectory here? It sounds like the answer from you is no, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Absolutely not. I mean, they could presumably buy the hostages for billions of dollars, but I don't see that happening either. Look, this Hamas has become, as the Israelis call it, a wing of Daesh, of the Islamic State. And you can't negotiate with them. The Israelis have no ties to this group, to Mohammed Adef, the leader of the militant wing. They don't trust him. They don't trust each other. And we saw from the attack on Saturday, it's an apocalyptic movement, and that's what should scare us all. They are ready to die. They are ready to kill the hostages.
Back in 2011, we saw Israel freeing more than 1,000 Palestinian hostages for one Israeli soldier. There's been a lot of conversation about that, just one person. And this was how seriously Israel took this particular hostage situation years ago. I think that gives you a sense of the scope at play here, Bob.
Yeah, well, there aren't enough, in Hamas's term, there aren't enough hostages to release. They don't really care that much about them. They say they do. But Hamas is looking at this as some sort of final apocalyptic battle. And they would like the Israelis to come into Gaza because they think they can inflict enormous damage on the Israeli army. That's to be seen, but this is the framework of what they're looking at this conflict. They want to draw in Lebanon. They want to draw in Syria. They want to draw in Jordan. And if need be, one day Egypt.
Bob Baer, it is a difficult moment and a grim moment here. Thank you very much for your expertise. What's happening here at home? We're seeing police across the country stepping up security at Jewish houses of worship, businesses, Israeli diplomatic buildings. as a former Hamas leader is calling for a global day of anger tomorrow. You're seeing more police getting deployed into cities with big Jewish populations like L.A., New York, Chicago, as multiple law enforcement officials are telling NBC News they're monitoring a lot of chatter on social media about potential retaliatory attacks against Israel's counterstrikes on Gaza. Julia Ainsley is with us now. Police in a bunch of cities say there's not like specific threats here that they know of ahead of this, whatever is going to happen tomorrow. And not just in the U.S., this is sort of this call to action globally here. Help us understand what's real and what's precautionary. In other words, how much of this is precautionary and how much of this is because of actual threats?
A lot of it is precautionary. We're told, they don't want to be caught by surprise, but this increased security posture began before these calls. It actually began earlier this week. They really want to protect houses of worship. They also want to protect some Palestinian Americans who might be here, who could become victims of a hate crime. And now they're upping their game. But I'm told this is really the most heightened level of security we've seen in a lot of U.S. cities, including D.C. in a long time. And in New York, we know that they're really trying to bring every police officer out of training. They're canceling training tomorrow. Everyone will be uniformed and on patrol. This is a big ramp up in security. They hope it's out of an abundance of caution, but they can't intervene and actually stop a potential perpetrator of violence until they get that specific, incredible threat. Right now, what they're monitoring is what they tell me are thousands of online posts.
The New York governor is out today, too, with a message on protecting Palestinian Americans as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so the New York Governor Hochul is saying, look, we also need to be mindful of Palestinian Americans who are not behind Hamas, but actually reject what's happening here. Here's what she had to say.
Hamas is a terrorist organization. They should not define the people the Palestinians who reject the violence, especially the horrific attacks that were perpetrated on the Jewish state last Saturday. People need to be protected.
So, Hallie, we'll continue to monitor, obviously, overnight. DHS is speaking with reporters to see what they're monitoring as well. And we'll keep, obviously, everyone informed tomorrow. But really, what I'm told is tomorrow's a bellwether to see how much of that anger and energy actually exists in the U.S. and globally.
Julia Ainsley, thank you so much for that. We're going to stay on top of our top story because here in Washington, too, there has been frustration. There has been anger from some corners over the fact that Congress still does not have a speaker and that Republicans in the House of Representatives are still talking about the whole speaker fight rather than dealing with this international crisis we've been talking about, with plans tonight for a vigil on the steps of the Capitol to honor the victims of that terror attack in Israel. House Republicans late today were wrapping up yet another meeting with no resolution at this point, with the now former Speaker, the ousted Kevin McCarthy, laying out the difficult task that Steve Scalise, the Speaker nominee, faces.
Do you think it's possible that he can get the votes?
Possible. It's a big hill, though. He told a lot of people he's going to be at 150, and he wasn't there.
16 House Republicans, according to our count, are now saying they will not vote for Scalise. Remember, he can only afford to lose the support of 4 of them and still have enough votes to actually get across the finish line, get Congress back to functioning again. They need that for a speaker. I want to bring in somebody who knows a lot about this, Republican Congressman Carlos Menendez of Florida. Thank you so much, Congressman, for being with us tonight.
It's my pleasure.
One of your colleagues told some of our reporters that not even the Lord Jesus himself could potentially get to 217 votes in the Republican conference here. Barring divine intervention, is it your view that your party can come together to pick a speaker sometime in the next 48, 72 hours?
I'm not saying 48 to 72 hours, but we can pick somebody here, and it doesn't have to be Jesus Christ.
Who do you want it to be?
Right now, I want somebody that we can coalesce so we can get 217 votes. I don't think Steve Scalise is there yet, and I'm not sure he's going to get there. Look, I'm still voting. I still want to see Kevin McCarthy come back. He had 210 votes, so I think that all we need to do is convince 8 people, 7 people to either switch their votes or not vote at all, and then I think we get Kevin McCarthy back as Speaker. He should never have been removed to begin with.
Do you think there's an appetite inside your party to do that? Do you think you could get enough members to switch their votes there?
I mean, look, a week ago Tuesday, 210 of us voted to keep him in, and I think that the majority of us want him back if he's willing to take the job. That's where my vote is going to go. on the first round, and then we'll see after that. I don't think that Steve is getting there. He's making an effort. He's got closed-door meetings with people that support and don't support him, trying to see what the issues are, and there are a number of different issues with different members. Mine is that I believe that what happened on, last Tuesday, a week ago Tuesday, it was a travesty. It was a coup, and I choose not to participate in a coup. We have a speaker. We had a speaker. Kevin McCarthy should be the speaker again.
Just a quick sort of logistical question here. There has been some scuttlebutt about the potential that the current Speaker pro tem, in other words, the kind of caregiver speaker who's temporarily in place, Patrick McHenry, could potentially serve as a more formal speaker for a short period of time, let's say a month and a half, 2 months, get us through the next government shutdown deadline mid-November. Is that something you'd support?
Oh, absolutely. Not only just for this, but, really, this has put a spotlight on a glaring hole that we have here in our government. Imagine if we have a speaker that is injured or has an illness that takes him or her away for an extended period of time, and we're going to stop working at the House. We need to bring legislation to cover this period, as long as it is, and hopefully it's short, but also looking toward the future to make sure that we have that covered in the event that a speaker in the future is incapacitated.
So what is the next step then here? When's the next meeting? What is your sense of a timeline?
Don't have that. Everything here is very fluid. We may have another closed-door session. I'm not sure how it's gonna get to. Look, I think that yesterday there was a strategic mistake. We should have stayed together until we got to somebody that had 217. The way the process was done, I think, was rushed. Steve only got like one more vote than 50% that was necessary. And then he declared the winner. No, that's not the way it was. Look, McCarthy got 186 votes back in December of last year, and we had to go through 15 rounds in order to get him, put in place as speaker. Coming out with 111, 113 votes, I don't think that bode well. And they should have known better. He should have known better that, hey, we need to stay here, iron out our differences, and find out who is that person that get to 217. It may not be either Scalise. It may not be Jordan. It may be somebody else.
Could it be McHenry?
It could be somebody else. It could be, but you know what? It's not going to be Jesus Christ because he's not here, but we will get a speaker and somebody that we can coalesce, and then we can go ahead with the business of America.
Let me just ask you, because of your work, obviously, on House Armed Services, on the Homeland Security Committee, we are seeing this international crisis that, as you know, we've been covering for the majority of our show at this point here. We are just learning now from our colleagues the Capitol Police are set to boost law enforcement presence tomorrow where you are because of some of these calls for some kind of day of anger or day of action, as some Hamas backers have suggested here. Can you talk through what message it sends globally here, that this is the gridlock we're facing here in Washington in the House of Representatives? And I also wonder where you are on tying aid to Israel to aid to Ukraine. This is an issue that's come up, as you know.
I think aid to Israel is separate from aid to Ukraine. I support both. But there are some of my colleagues and some colleagues over on the Democrat side that support Israel, don't support Ukraine, and vice versa. I think there is good, strong bilateral support for both. But I have no problem in separating them and voting twice. I will vote to aid Israel. I stand with Israel, always have, always will. And I also stand with the people of Ukraine in their fight for freedom against Russia.
What do you make of the reporting that we have here at NBC News showing that, according to sources, U.S. intelligence indicates that Iran was surprised by the specificity of this Hamas attack on Israel over the weekend?
I don't believe it, to be honest with you. I've heard some big whoppers in my day, but that Iran didn't know such a huge operation was happening from Hamas, which is basically their surrogate. I don't believe it for 1 second. And if somebody's trying to, throw Iran, a towel, and that's a Spanish saying that we have, tirar la toalla, no, I don't believe it at all. Iran knew what was going on. Iran funds them, for God's sakes, and I'm sure Hamas kept them abreast. If not, Iran actually said, this is what you have to do, how you have to do it. It was a pretty complex operation, taking months and months of planning, and you think Iran didn't know anything about it? Come on, give me a break.
Congressman, it is a critical moment here, not just in the United States, but around the world. Thank you so much for your time here tonight. We appreciate you being with us.
All right, thank you.
Just in the last few minutes, as we stay with news out of the Capitol, we've seen New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez reacting to some new federal charge, a new federal charge that's now been filed against him after prosecutors alleged today that he was essentially working for our government and the Egyptians at the same time. This is a follow-up after he was hit with those corruption charges just a few weeks ago. In this new statement into us in just the last couple of minutes, the senator says this new charge flies in the face of his humanitarian work with Egypt and that his loyalties lie only with the United States. Prosecutors now say that Menendez took bribes and acted as a so-called foreign agent on behalf of Egypt while leading the powerful Senate Foreign Relations Committee. These are some pictures, federal investigators say, are of Menendez and his wife with those Egyptians. The indictment says the senator provided sensitive U.S. government information and took other steps that secretly aided the government of Egypt. It means Menendez is now facing 4 federal charges with the possibility of him spending decades behind bars. NBC's Tom Winter is following this for us. Tom, what have we missed, and help bring us up to speed here as it relates to these developments with Senator Menendez?
Right. So it relates to a couple of different things, including a charge that is almost never charged in the United States, Hallie, because you wouldn't think it would need to be. And that's 18 U.S.C. 219. And so basically it says that if you work for the United States government, either in the executive branch, the legislative branch, or the judicial branch, you can't work on behalf of a foreign government at the same time you're doing it. And if you do, you have to tell the Justice Department about it, and that's what the senator is alleged to have violated here, and that's the 4th count. The new one that's added today, as you said, maximum of 2 years in prison and or a fine, but in reality for the senator it's probably a potentially larger, if convicted, public relations hit, because it says that he was working on behalf of Egypt, passing along information. The amount of people that work at the embassy, the prosecutors note in the indictment that it is not a classified piece of information, but it is highly sensitive, because if you're a foreign intelligence operation and you're looking at the amount of people that are in a U.S. embassy, you might be able to, and I'm not going to go into the specifics of how, but you might be able to determine just how many people who are working in that embassy that might be spying on behalf of the United States in that country. It's a very sensitive information, and prosecutors say that's just one of the things that the senator did as well, is trying to flow through weapons sales to Egypt.
Tom Winter, thank you so much for that breakdown. A lot of moving pieces here in Washington and beyond tonight. Thank you. Coming up here on the show, some new government numbers show inflation is actually holding steady. What that could mean for what you buy and what you budget for what you buy. Plus, maybe game shows and reality TV for a while yet. The latest on the breakdown and talks to try to end the Hollywood actors' strike. Next. Israeli spy agencies have long been considered some of the best in the world, especially when it comes to their own neighborhood, the volatile Middle East. That's one reason it has so perplexed many around the world that Israel appeared to be so surprised by that Hamas terror attack. Here's Ken Delanian with our breakdown tonight, a look at Israel's long history of sophisticated intel gathering.
These people may look like tourists, but according to Dubai police, they are Israeli intelligence operatives sneaking into a hotel to kill a senior Hamas leader. This wasn't the finest hour of the Mossad, as Israel's version of the CIA is known, because the alleged operation in 2010 was exposed to the world, but the ultimate goal was achieved. The Mossad and other Israeli intelligence agencies are known as some of the world's best, especially when it comes to spying in the Middle East, where Israel faces threats on all sides and from within. That's why it was so shocking that Hamas was able to launch a surprise attack that penetrated deep into Israeli territory and killed more than 1,300 of its citizens.
We did not receive any concrete warning, and they caught us off guard. And as Israelis, we've always prided ourselves on the excellence of our intelligence services.
From the founding of the country after World War II, Israeli intelligence built an aura of invincibility through a long history of risky and successful operations, from espionage to assassinations, such as the 1960 capture of high-ranking Nazi Adolf Eichmann, who was hiding in Argentina, or tracking down and killing many of the Palestinian militants who killed 11 Israeli athletes at the 1972 Munich Olympics.
Athletes of the village awoke to the tragic news.
The story portrayed in this Steven Spielberg film.
I give a signal by switching off the light.
And more recently, Mossad is believed to be behind the mysterious killings of Iranian scientists linked to that country's nuclear program, although not confirmed by NBC News.
Israeli intelligence was not just put in charge of collecting intelligence, but also translating that intelligence into way beyond enemy lines, daring operations.
Today, the Gaza Strip and the Palestinian areas of the West Bank are among the top intelligence gathering priorities of Israeli intel agencies. Former intelligence officials say they run elaborate spy networks, watch closely from overhead with drones and satellites, and monitor communications. Shin Bet, the domestic intelligence agency, even recruited the son of a Hamas founder who shared publicly that he spied for Israel for a decade. Along Israel's border with Gaza, the country built a sophisticated barrier full of electronic sensors. But Hamas was able to breach the so-called Iron Wall with drones, explosives, bulldozers, and even paragliders that apparently went unnoticed by Israel's vaunted spy agencies.
How come they didn't know? That's a question yet to be answered.
Ken Delanian is joining us now. That is the question, right? And we heard from one top military official today saying they will get to those questions, but right now it is time for war. Their focus is on retaliating against Gaza, against Hamas in Gaza for the terror attack on Saturday. Down the road, though, this is a salient question for them.
Absolutely, Hallie. And it really does look like Hamas achieved both strategic surprise and tactical surprise. Hamas has given interviews, and they've said that for 2 years they disguised this operation. They didn't tell a lot of people. They didn't talk about it on the phones they knew were monitored by the Israelis. So the Israelis weren't looking for an attack. They were looking in the West Bank. They were looking elsewhere. That's the strategic surprise. Tactically, they overwhelmed that smart fence I talked about in the piece with explosives. They blinded the sensors, and the border was thinly staffed. It's not clear why that is, but what is clear is that Israel was divided politically. Officers were resigning their commissions over that political controversy over Netanyahu and the judiciary. So this was exactly the right time for Hamas to mount this attack, and they were successful.
Ken Delanian, thank you so much. Appreciate you taking a look at that for us. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, new numbers out today show inflation is up 3.7% over the past year. Now, that's slowing down, but it's not quite slow enough for the Fed's liking. They want that number closer to 2%. So what does it mean for you? It means the Fed may keep hiking interest rates, which could affect everything from your credit cards to new mortgages and other loans. Number 2, a lot of damage in Florida today after at least one tornado and multiple storms hit parts of the state. Look at this. Officials say some people there have catastrophic loss to property. You can see trees knocked down, obviously houses damaged, cars crushed. Fortunately, at this point, officials are not reporting that anybody's been hurt. Number 3, the Black Texas high school student who is suspended over his hairstyle will now apparently be sent to a disciplinary school through next month. This is according to a letter sent to his family. You may remember this story. Daryl George served more than a month of in-school suspension because the district said that his dreadlocks violated the dress code. His mother and an attorney say that is not true. Last month, they filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the Texas governor and attorney general. Number 4, a player in California finally won the nearly $1.8 billion Powerball jackpot, second biggest prize in lottery history. Cash value, if you take the cash payout, $700 million. If you don't live in California, better luck next time. Number 5, talks between striking Hollywood actors and studios have been suspended today. You know, these two sides have been fighting over a bunch of things. Streaming revenue, the use of AI, for example. SAG-AFTRA has been striking since mid-July. This isn't long after Hollywood writers voted to approve a contract agreement that ended their nearly 5-month strike. So writers getting back to work, actors still not. We'll see how it goes. When we come back, we're taking you inside one of our producers reporting, speaking with a festival organizer in Israel who says she came face-to-face with Hamas gunmen. That's our backstory tonight. Time now to get the backstory, our behind-the-scenes look at how a story comes together and how it fits into our bigger picture. And tonight, we're looking at a young woman, a festival organizer, who came face-to-face with Hamas gunmen at the music festival that killed more than 260 people. Hamas terrorists killed those people, those civilians. Noah Beer telling our NBC News senior investigative producer Anna Schechter the thumping of the music was so loud she couldn't hear the bombs going off, but she could see them. She thought they were fireworks. Detailing the horrific scene she saw as she fled, saying, and I'm quoting here, "I saw 2 terrorists waiting for me to drive, so I just stepped on the gas." Anna Schechter is joining us now. Anna, talk to us about how you connected with Noah and how she was talking with you about this absolutely nightmare that she lived through.
Thanks so much for having me, Hallie. So Noah was so candid with me, and I'm just so grateful to her because she gave the fullest account of what happened in those horrific moments after the attack. And just to give a shout out to all the amazing bookers and social news gathering teams at NBC. They have been feeding me nonstop phone numbers of relatives, friends of relatives, friends of friends, people that they might have seen on social media. And so I've just been dialing every number, and I just got so lucky to meet Noah on Sunday, actually. So really the day after the attack, and she was so raw and almost stunned, like she hadn't started to process the trauma yet. So she gave me her story just in full. And you were just describing as she actually was able to get to her car because she was parked in the VIP area because she was one of the organizers. She brought a Hungarian DJ who had flown in the night of the party. She picked him up at the Tel Aviv airport, got down to the festival, and after his set, they decided to stay on in the morning. She said it was just a great time, a great vibe. And that's when she saw what looked like fireworks. And then security started to say, you know, everybody get down. And she told the Hungarian DJ, because he's not Israeli, he's not used to rockets. And she and her friends, they all know to get down and take cover. But she thought it was just normal rocket fire. She didn't realize the extent of this horrific, brutal attack. So she gets in the car with her friend, the DJ, and drives off. And she just thanks God that she was using her boss's Jeep because it was much more secure than her own vehicle. And she saw some of her friends and some other guys who were at the festival go off into a bomb shelter on the side of the road. And that turned out to be, unfortunately, deadly for many of them. And she kept driving. And that's when she drove right into the terrorists. And I think we have a quote to put up on screen. She said, "They looked me straight in the eye, and they saw terror in my eyes." And she said it a little bit more explicitly, but that they did not care. And she described them as just bloodthirsty people shooting indiscriminately. They didn't care about her fear. They didn't care about anything. And there's this harrowing moment she describes where the car got stuck in reverse and she couldn't move the car because it wasn't hers, and she was just figuring out the buttons, and miraculously she's able to drive off and get the people in the back of her car who were shot and wounded to the hospital, and they all survived.
So she had picked up people? She had picked up people that
Yes.
she had seen as she was escaping at it?
As she was driving the car, there was like this massive traffic jam. And so she opened the car door. She saw someone lying on the ground from a motorcycle. She thought it was a traffic accident. And her thought was, oh, let me go help. And then she started hearing bullets, and the bullets were flying over her head. And she said to the DJ, get down, get behind the car door because it's metal. And there were guys kind of crawling on the ground. She just shoved 3 guys that she didn't know in the back of her car. Unfortunately, they were all wounded by gunshots. But she was able to get them to safety. So she's a true hero.
It is just an incredible story of heroism, Anna, in just what has been a landscape from hell, frankly, for so many of those people living in Israel and those survivors. Anna Schechter, thank you for bringing us those stories. So important to tell them. We appreciate you doing that.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. NBC News covers hundreds of other stories every day, and because it's tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Midwest Bureau, police in Minnesota say they've arrested somebody after 5 officers were hurt in a shooting today. Officials say they were serving a search warrant, but it turned into this hours-long standoff. You can see it from the air here. All of the officers are expected to be okay. Out of our Southern Bureau, you might remember Caitlin Armstrong. She's the Texas woman accused of murdering a professional cyclist. Officials say they were romantically linked to the same man. But police say she tried to escape while she was out of jail for a doctor's appointment. She apparently took off running while still in handcuffs. It took about 10 minutes for police to catch her. She's now going to face more charges for trying to get away. And out of our Northeast Bureau, police in Massachusetts would like to charge 3 men with assault and battery in connection with the death of a fan at a New England Patriots game recently. Officials say there was a fight in the stands before his death last month. Cause of death is still pending, but preliminary autopsy results blame an apparent medical event. Coming up here on the show, what the biggest social media companies are trying to do to crack down on harmful content about the war in Israel on their apps with Hamas. Is it too little, too late? That's coming up. Later today, the European Commission is officially launching an investigation into X, what used to be Twitter, to see if it actually complies with its rules on harmful content, illegal content in the middle of this Israel-Hamas war. That request coming not long after X's CEO said that it removed or labeled tens of thousands of pieces of content, meaning they flagged it, and removed hundreds of Hamas-affiliated accounts. The EU is also sending the same unofficial warning to the CEOs of Meta and TikTok. They haven't directly addressed those warnings. I want to bring in NBC's tech correspondent, Jake Ward. So, Jake, this goes to this issue that you and I have been talking about here since this war erupted after the terror attack against Israel on Saturday, which is so much misinformation, disinformation, bad information on these platforms. And yet, at this moment, getting real information in real time can be so critical to the people living in this region here. It is almost an impossible thing to handle if these companies aren't staffed or equipped or able to keep up with the bad info.
That's absolutely right, Hallie. I mean, if you are feeling overwhelmed by the amount of misinformation and terrible imagery coming across social media right now, well, you are not alone. Even some of the most veteran researchers who look at misinformation and what experts call information pollution say this is as bad as they have ever seen it. I spoke to Claire Wardle, just a foundational researcher, one of the very first people to study misinformation in this context, and she says that it's simply because of the changing landscape of social media and the fact that these platforms just don't seem to be up to the task that we are all being besieged in this way. Have a listen.
Right now, I think the challenge is we've never had this many platforms in such a confusing situation with, to be totally honest, platforms that just aren't up to the job. They're just not able to do the necessary work.
I mean, this is really the situation that we are in at the moment, Hallie, is just this feeling of being absolutely overwhelmed. You combine, the cutbacks at a lot of these companies when it came to the trust and safety teams that they had on board, and the fact that so much is being pushed out across social media, beginning in places like Telegram, the preferred platform of Hamas, and then it just spreads like wildfire from there. So just, a tidal wave of terrible, terrible imagery, terrible content, in some cases just misinformation, in some cases disinformation, and at the very least, even when it's accurate, just terrible, terrible to look at.
There was also, even before this war started, the concern about the rise in anti-Semitism that we've seen in the United States and the way that X specifically was handling some of that, right?
That's absolutely right. Elon Musk went on a long rant right after he acquired Twitter, responding to charges that anti-Semitic posts had increased as much as they had. And, over and over again, he blamed the Anti-Defamation League. They today are pointing out that there is so much graphic video moving across X at the moment. Premium subscribers, according to a new research report out by the Tech Transparency Project, are being able to post things directly from Hamas accounts with the Hamas logo on them. They say, we implore social media platforms to take this stuff down in their statement. But, it's also important to point out here, right, this does not serve Palestinians as well. There is also terrible misinformation moving out across them. And in the coming days, we're going to need as much accurate social media as we can to keep track of what goes on in Gaza and what happens to the Palestinians. So it's really a needle that we have to thread here, and it doesn't seem anybody's up to that task yet.
Jake Ward, thank you very much. Still to come here on the show, you are looking at live pictures, or you're about to be, at Columbia University, which closed down its campus to the public today over protests related to the war. We got more on that coming up next. We'll take you there. Right now, a pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian rally is just starting to wrap up at Columbia University after the campus shut down to the public today, a day after an Israeli student was beaten in front of a library on campus. It comes as some are calling on schools to try to protect students who have different views related to this war. The former Harvard president Larry Summers, who came out earlier this week criticizing a letter signed by 35 campus organizations placing blame on Israel for the Hamas terror attack, is now raising the caution flag on not unfairly outing pro-Palestinian students, in his view. This is after what's called a doxing truck, or that's what they called it, showed up on Harvard's campus. It's basically these digital billboards that show the names and pictures of students who allegedly signed that controversial letter. George Solis is live for us at Columbia there. George, talk us through what you're seeing tonight at that school.
Yeah, good evening, Hallie. Things very peaceful here for the moment. You can actually see the literal divide of the pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian protesters. Take a look at what's happening right now. The students here that have been organizing, they've been closing this off to the media. They haven't allowed us to go in, but they are now lying here on the grass. They are now starting to get up. We're told that this is going to wrap up here within the next few minutes or so, and then they're going to peacefully disperse. Again, there has been no hiccups here between the two sides, maybe a little bit of a exchange of words here and there, but both students groups just sort of keeping to their own with their own messages here, the pro-Palestinian side and then the pro-Israeli side. We had a chance to talk to some students on both sides who obviously are weighing in on this very polarizing topic, many of them saying they want their voices heard, they want their message heard, they really don't appreciate any of the violence and some of the rhetoric that has been spread out there at this moment. But again, you can hear the chants here, Free Palestine, and the pro-Israeli side staying quiet through much of this, Hallie. And again, they're on the move again. We're not quite sure how they're going to disperse. We're just told they're going to do it in a way to avoid any other conflict here that may arise. I do want to quickly play some of the sound from some of the interviews we did with some of the students. Take a listen.
Even if I didn't have family, I think I'd still make it down here. It's a decent thing to do. There's not a Jew in the world that can't say that there's a connection of them who's affected.
Yeah, Hallie, one thing I also want to note is a lot of the students here on the pro-Palestinian side have been wearing face masks, and a lot of them have been refusing to speak with us. A lot of them concerned over those doxing concerns that some of their images or likenesses may be spread or possibly be used for any type of misinformation. At least that's what they've been told here by some of the student organizers. So speaking to them has actually been quite challenging.
Well, you make this point about this issue of so-called doxing here. We talked about that controversial Harvard letter signed by pro-Palestinian groups placing the blame for the Hamas terror attack on the shoulders of Israel here. There have been some CEOs that have suggested that names should be released, right? Not just these student groups, but the actual names of people in those groups should be released so that these companies could maybe blacklist them, not hire them. What else do you know about sort of the fallout from that piece of it?
Obviously, and that's starting to make waves, right? I mean, people put on a list here, obviously that's not a good message. It's not something that is sitting well with a lot of members of the community. One thing we want to do is put up that statement that was put out by that student group. It says, "We, the undersigned student organization, hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all the unfolding violence. Today's events did not occur in a vacuum. For the last 2 decades, millions of Palestinians in Gaza have been forced to live in an open-air prison." And some of the backlash has been pretty swift, as some of those student organizations there, Hallie, have actually withdrawn their names from that list. But obviously, the sentiment, the idea of putting people's name on a list, not sitting well with a lot of people, and already a very sensitive subject, Hallie.
George Solis, live for us there in New York. George, thank you. We are coming on the air tonight with the anguish and the resolve in Israel, the crisis building in Gaza, and the new warnings about a potential day of violence tomorrow. In Israel, tanks gathering on the border with Gaza. New video of Israeli troops raiding buildings after that terror attack. We'll take you live to the region. Plus, questions of accountability as to how Hamas managed to execute this stunning attack. We're taking a closer look at Israel's world-renowned intelligence service in our breakdown. Plus, what a top military official is saying about why Israel didn't see this coming. Then here at home, those new concerns with a so-called Friday the 13th call to action by Hamas backers. How the biggest cities in this country are getting prepared as a precaution. And how an organizer of that music festival in Israel came face to face with Hamas terrorists, describing the horrific scene to our team. How they reported it out in tonight's backstory. And in Washington here, the House still without a speaker, even as that international crisis is blowing up. Inside, the closed-door meetings happening today with divided Republicans unable to come together. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and tonight it is the rage, the shock, the desperation here, the next steps to try and rescue hostages being held after that devastating terror attack in Israel, and new concern now about what could happen tomorrow as you are looking live at Gaza. Israeli military officials saying it is time for war with that country shaken to its core by some of the horrific, graphic photos being released, including of slaughtered and burned babies. Our team on the ground caught this. Tanks moving across the outskirts of Ashkelon earlier today. That's a couple of miles from the Gaza border. And the former leader of Hamas now calling on the Arab world to protest tomorrow, Friday, around the world in support of their attacks, to join their fight. On the Israeli side, new body cam video into us late tonight shows those special forces freeing hostages Saturday, according to officials, and capturing terrorists, with many Israeli families still so desperate to hear any sign of life from their loved ones who are believed to have been kidnapped by Hamas. At the same time, in Gaza, the health system there is at what's being called breaking point, according to UN officials, with doctors saying they've never seen this kind of thing before.
From the day one, all the surgeons in Gaza have been called to the hospital to help because we were not enough. We couldn't handle this amount of injuries. And it's just heartbreaking.
Cemeteries are filling up. They are not safe to reach. So some survivors are now burying their family members next to their homes. Tonight, thousands of people are dead and hurt across Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. With the Secretary of State in Israel today, the Defense Secretary will be there tomorrow. U.S. officials racing to help free those hostages and find safe passage out of Gaza for the civilians there. Ali Velshi is in Ashkelon, Israel for us. Raf Sanchez is in Ashdod. Josh Letterman is in Tel Aviv. Ali, I want to start with you here. As you have seen what it's like on the ground here, talk to us about military mobilization, what the expectation is, and what you're seeing.
Well, I was actually just sort of looking off, talking to our guys here to figure out. We've been hearing some sounds that sound a little different in the last few minutes than we have been hearing for a while. That's a jet above. So there's a lot of activity going on. The Gaza border is 2.5 miles in that direction. We've seen a little activity in the sky right now. What we do know is that the Israeli military is amassed not just at the typical Gaza border, which is over here, but that long stretch of Gaza that borders into Israel, where a lot of these kibbutzim were that were attacked. So the Israeli army is poised and ready to go in. They're still mobilizing their 360,000 reserves that they've called up, but they've got enough troops to actually manage this. The bigger question is how do they manage the hostage situation? Right now, Israel has stopped the flow of, sorry, it's loud, the jets are getting louder here. They've stopped the flow of fuel, of water, of food into Gaza, and we are seeing a humanitarian crisis develop there. About 300,000 people not in their homes, either because their homes have been destroyed or because they are worried about their homes being destroyed. Because of the power cuts, communication is not good, so the Israeli jets are dropping leaflets into targeted areas to say that your area is going to be targeted, so get out. It is causing people to get out. The hospitals are full. There are a lot of people trying to get out of Gaza, but there's no way out of Gaza. They've gathered at the Egyptian border, but that, too, is not something that is feasible for them. Secretary of State Blinken, who was here today, said they're trying to work on some kind of a humanitarian corridor to get those Gazans out, but at the moment that's not in place, so the Gazans are stuck inside.
We have talked about, so there's the issue, of course, of the civilians in Gaza. There's the issue of the hostages trapped, presumably in Gaza, by Hamas. The U.S., as you've laid out, stepping in to try to help. You talked to one man whose mother, he believes, has been kidnapped here. He doesn't know anything, but he's still holding out or trying to hold out hope, Ali.
Yeah. So of the maybe 150 people we think Israelis who are being held by Hamas, or at least people think that their family members are being held in by Hamas, about 100 of them have been informed that that's true, that Hamas did take their family members. They don't know if they're alive or not, but they did take them. He's not one of them. So I asked him what the status update was on his mother, who's a 74-year-old Canadian-born resident of a kibbutz here.
The only thing I know for a fact is that her body isn't in the house. Other than that, we do have indications, rumors. We have strong assumptions that she is being held in Gaza. But I'm careful because I don't really know.
I don't really know. He can only hope at this point. Hallie, back to you.
New video of this moment, an Israeli minister face-to-face with furious Israeli survivors at a hospital. Listen. You hear men there angry, yelling things like resign, ask for forgiveness, take responsibility, that their friends were murdered. Just one example of what other Israelis are feeling tonight, that they were failed by the government with hundreds of civilians dead, including at that music festival Saturday, where Hamas murdered more than 200 people. Our Raf Sanchez is there on the ground.
This is our first time inside the Supernova Festival since that attack in the early hours of Saturday morning. This was a place of music, a place of dancing, a place of joy, and now there is just a deathly, deathly silence here. This was one of the artistic tents at the festival. You can see people here were painting, they were expressing themselves. And this is just one of these many scenes we've seen all across southern Israel, a place that is frozen in time. We don't know the person who painted this. Are they still alive? Have they been kidnapped? Are they inside of Gaza? Over here is one of the parked cars. This symbol is spray painted by the Israeli military, and it shows that this car has been searched, that there's no explosives in it. And if you just come around, you can see, as in every one of these cars, there are the makings of everything you'd need for a fun weekend at a music festival. It looks like this person has paint, there's chocolate in there, there's Kleenex, there's extra water. If you just follow me over this way, Israeli authorities say that there were about 3,500 people at this festival, at least 260 of whom were killed in the terrorist attack. And this was really where the violence started. People were out here, they were dancing, the music was loud, but you can see in videos some of them start to realize that something is wrong, and some of them are even pointing towards the black dots on the horizon, which are the Hamas paragliders coming in. This was what was the main bar at the festival, and you can see everywhere they're just half-drunk bottles of Johnny Walker whiskey, of vodka. People were having a good time here at 6 a.m. when this murderous wave swept in, and one of the many, many painful questions is, where was the army? We were so close to the Gaza border here. This is an area that was at risk. The Israeli military, when you ask them, how is it that you were unable to protect this site, unable to protect all these different areas across southern Israel, they say clearly mistakes were made. Clearly this was a massive failure. They say there will be time after this war to answer those painful questions. But for many of the families of young people who died here, they waited day after agonizing day for news, hoping and praying that their loved ones might still be alive. And many of them found out they weren't.
That was Raf Sanchez reporting earlier in the day. He is joining us now live. Raf Sanchez in Ashdod, Israel. Raf, we're glad to have you. Thank you for that look, that important look at what that scene looked like. We know the music festival was the site of the most horrific deaths in one place. But along the Gaza Strip, many kibbutzim were also affected, right? These are these sort of communities, these smaller villages where a number of people live. There is a different sort of dynamic to life in some of those places here. Help us understand in context the sort of broader political backdrop here and some of the discontent even with the Netanyahu administration here, even before this terror attack.
Yeah, Hallie, so over the course of last year, you and I have spoken many times about the political divisions that really seem to be in danger of tearing Israel apart. Israelis on the streets week after week after week against Prime Minister Netanyahu's plans to weaken Israel's Supreme Court, this country teetering on the edge of a constitutional crisis. All of those things were true until the early hours of Saturday morning, when this terrorist attack just completely changed everything. Today, there is a totally different dynamic in Israel. Two things can be true at once. There is a sense of stunned national unity here, that those political squabbles have been put to one side. There is literally a national unity government. Prime Minister Netanyahu inviting one of the country's big centrist parties to join a national unity government to prosecute this war. Hallie, at the same time, there is a deep, surging, I would say almost volcanic anger that this happens, and that Israel's leadership, both political and military, didn't stop it from happening. And you're starting to see that anger coming to the surface now. People confronting government ministers at hospitals, people calling on television for Prime Minister Netanyahu to resign. So it is a very fraught moment with a lot of things going on at once. Hallie.
Have you picked that up, Raf, not just in your time, obviously, in Israel, but even before this terror attack, but since, as you've been on the ground here, talking with survivors, talking with people who lost loved ones?
You know, a lot of people are in such a deep state of shock. I ask the families of hostages, because it feels like an important question, what do you think is the best way to get your loved one home? Do you imagine that it's Israeli commandos storming into Gaza and rescuing them from the tunnels? Or do you imagine that it's a negotiation? And people really come down on all sides. There are some people who are convinced that their loved ones are only going to get back into Israel when Israel's military storms Gaza, levels the place, kills every single member of Hamas, and pulls them out from the tunnels. And there are other people who say, listen, I don't care about the politics. I don't care about revenge on a national level. All I want is my son or my daughter home. And if that means negotiating with Hamas through Qatar, through some third party, then make it happen. And Israel, even though it is a sworn enemy of Hamas, they have negotiated in the past about prisoners. Hallie?
Raf Sanchez, live for us in Ashdod. Raf, thank you so much. We're glad to have you and your context and your perspective and your reporting. Thanks. We've got the Secretary of State set to go to Qatar tomorrow, in part to try to help find a way to get some of those hostages back home. And his visit to Israel today, casting this war in intensely personal terms.
It's impossible for me to look at the photos of families killed, such as the mother, father, and 3 small children murdered as they sheltered in their home in kibbutz near Oz, and not think of my own children.
We know now that in addition to the hundreds of Israelis killed, the hundreds of civilians in Gaza as well, at least 27 Americans have been killed in the attacks by Hamas, with the White House today saying they have no plans to send new boots on the ground, new troops to Israel to help in any kind of on-the-ground rescue operation. At this point, they have sent technical expertise. They're talking now, the U.S. is, with Egypt, with Israel, to try to get safe passage for somewhere between 500 and 600 Palestinian Americans in Gaza, too, trapped in the Gaza Strip right now. I want to bring in Josh Letterman, who is joining us now. We know the defense secretary is also going to Israel. What does this look like, Josh? What is the expectation out of some of these meetings here? Because it seems like, based on your reporting, and we've talked about it, the idea is contain this to a single front for Israel, meaning the southern part of the country on the border with Gaza. There has been concern what happens with Lebanon. We've seen some activity from Syria as well, isolated to a degree. Where does this go?
Well, containment is definitely the top priority for the U.S. right now. It's a theme for all of these visits. So Blinken's visit today was about hostages and containment. And Austin's visit tomorrow, the defense secretary, will be about U.S. assistance to Israel, with the U.S. Already having a plane load of munitions for Israel arriving here. They have advisors on the ground, but also about deterrence, containing this crisis from spiraling to involve other countries like Iran, other militant groups like Hezbollah. And so as part of that deterrent effort, the U.S. has already sent the USS Gerald Ford carrier strike group to the eastern Mediterranean. The USS Dwight Eisenhower also headed to this region on a pre-scheduled mission. And so this is all a part of what Austin will be discussing when he meets tomorrow here in Israel with Netanyahu, with Defense Minister Gallant, as well as the War Cabinet, about what they can do to try to keep this as a single front conflict between Israel and Gaza, and not to involve really a broader conflict within the Middle East.
When you look at the broader message that the Biden administration wants to send, it has been so clear, and we heard it today from Secretary Blinken repeatedly, the idea that the U.S. stands shoulder to shoulder with Israel, which has, in the U.S. view, the absolute right to defend itself, an obligation to defend itself, to retaliate here. And Secretary Blinken said something else that was striking. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, something along the lines of, and it is incumbent on Israel to do it in a way that is consistent with sort of the norms of the developed world. In other words, not to essentially not to turn into terrorists themselves, basically. And again, I'm not putting words in his mouth. I'm sort of paraphrasing his lines here. That felt like a moment here as well.
Yeah, that's right. There's really the public message and the private message. The public one is we stand with Israel. We will support Israel's defense. Israel has a right to make sure that it eliminates threats to its existence and its security. And then behind the scenes, we know that officials are more candidly saying what Blinken was alluding to there, which is, look, we're going to support you taking action against Hamas in Gaza, but we really want to see Israel abide by international law, not commit war crimes, try to be restrained, and try to protect civilians. That is important not only to U.S. values and support, but also, of course, to maintaining the international credibility and support that is going to be needed for Israel to be able to be successful in this campaign and in its security in the longer run, Hallie.
Josh Lennerman, live for us in Tel Aviv. Thank you. Of course, we've been talking about this issue of hostages. More than 100 believed to have been held by Hamas right now. That is an unprecedented number. Just one more thing that is unprecedented in this war here. Among the hostages, of course, are Americans. It's believed, according to the White House, that Secretary Blinken is trying to get released. As you see some of these disturbing videos here of people being taken. Let's bring in former CIA official Bob Baer for more on this. I think, Bob, you have some expertise here in what this moment might be like as far as either the extraction of hostages, some sort of deal to get these hostages out. If you talk about a rescue, the logistics here are incredibly complicated. Ali Velshi was talking with us earlier about Gaza City, right? And Gaza itself is incredibly dense. It is so small and it is so packed. It is very urban here. That presents a separate series of challenges.
Well, look, the hostages, we can only guess where they are right now. And Hamas over the years, last 2 decades, has been tunneling all through Gaza. They've been tunneling under the border. They look at these hostages as extremely valuable, and they are not going to give them up easily. And they're down in those tunnels, which would be almost impossible to take without the hostages dying. The Israelis don't have maps of them. They're probably being moved around, so the intelligence is zero practically. And the only way Israel can get them back is by force, and that's a land invasion of Gaza. In order to invade Gaza and hold it and occupy it and get the hostages out, you pretty much have to flatten it, as happened today, which is a humanitarian disaster which will have repercussions for a very, very long time. So Israel is really in a bind, and the United States has gone to gutter, who over the years has supported Hamas, has been very close. Private money has gone into Hamas. They have a certain amount of influence over Hamas to give them up. But right now, I don't see the Hamas we're talking about today, the Izzadin Qassam brigades, giving these hostages up. I just don't see it.
Well, this was my question to you, is what could the Qataris do? I mean, do you believe that they have the potential to change the trajectory here? It sounds like the answer from you is no, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Absolutely not. I mean, they could presumably buy the hostages for billions of dollars, but I don't see that happening either. Look, this Hamas has become, as the Israelis call it, a wing of Daesh, of the Islamic State. And you can't negotiate with them. The Israelis have no ties to this group, to Mohammed Adef, the leader of the militant wing. They don't trust them. They don't trust each other. And we saw from the attack on Saturday, it's an apocalyptic movement, and that's what should scare us all. They are ready to die. They are ready to kill the hostages.
Back in 2011, we saw Israel freeing more than 1,000 Palestinian hostages for one Israeli soldier. There's been a lot of conversation about that, just one person. And this was how seriously Israel took this particular hostage situation years ago. I think that gives you a sense of the scope at play here, Bob.
Yeah, well, there aren't enough, you know, in Hamas's term, there aren't enough hostages to release. They don't really care that much about them. They say they do, but Hamas is looking at this as some sort of final apocalyptic battle. And they would like the Israelis to come into Gaza because they think they can inflict enormous damage on the Israeli army. That's to be seen, but this is the framework of what they're looking at this conflict. They want to draw in Lebanon, they want to draw in Syria, they want to draw in Jordan, and if need be, one day Egypt.
Bob Baer, it is a difficult moment and a grim moment here. Thank you very much for your expertise. We have learned in just the last hour that Capitol Police are set to boost their presence tomorrow here in Washington on Capitol Hill in response to social media posts calling for a so-called Day of Rage. No specific threat, they believe, but as a precaution. It comes as other police all across the country are stepping up security at Jewish houses of worship, at businesses, at Israeli diplomatic buildings as well. More officers are being deployed in cities with big Jewish populations like L.A., New York, Chicago. Comes as multiple law enforcement officials are telling NBC News they're monitoring a lot of chatter online about potential retaliatory attacks against Israel's counterstrikes on Gaza. Julia Ainsley is with us now. Police in a bunch of cities say there's not like specific threats here that they know of ahead of this, whatever is going to happen tomorrow. And not just in the U.S. This is sort of this call to action globally here. Help us understand what's real and what's precautionary. In other words, how much of this is precautionary and how much of this is because of actual threats?
A lot of it is precautionary. We're told, they don't want to be caught by surprise, but this increased security posture began before these calls. It actually began earlier this week. They really want to protect houses of worship. They also want to protect some Palestinian Americans who might be here, who could become victims of a hate crime. And now they're upping their game. But I'm told this is really the most heightened level of security we've seen in a lot of U.S. cities, including D.C. in a long time. And in New York, we know that they're really trying to bring every police officer out of training. They're canceling training tomorrow. Everyone will be uniformed and on patrol. This is a big ramp up in security. They hope it's out of an abundance of caution, but they can't intervene and actually stop a potential perpetrator of violence until they get that specific, incredible threat. Right now, what they're monitoring is what they tell me are thousands of online posts.
The New York governor is out today, too, with a message on protecting Palestinian Americans as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so the New York Governor Hochul is saying, look, we also need to be mindful of Palestinian Americans who are not behind Hamas, but actually reject what's happening here. Here's what she had to say.
Hamas is a terrorist organization. They should not define the people the Palestinians who reject the violence, especially the horrific attacks that were perpetrated on the Jewish state last Saturday. People need to be protected.
So, Hallie, we'll continue to monitor, obviously, overnight. DHS is speaking with reporters to see what they're monitoring as well. And we'll keep, obviously, everyone informed tomorrow. But really, what I'm told is tomorrow's a bellwether to see how much of that anger and energy actually exists in the U.S. and globally.
Julia Ainsley, thank you so much for that. Back here in Washington, some frustration, some anger from some over the fact that there's still no speaker. The Republicans haven't picked somebody to be the next Speaker of the House, given what we've been talking about for the last 24 minutes of this show, the international crisis that is unfolding in Israel and in Gaza. There are plans tonight for a vigil on the steps of the Capitol to honor the victims of that terror attack in Israel. That building, of course, is where House Republicans have been again today. They've been meeting, they've been talking. They have not been resolving the issue because right now it does not appear that the Speaker nominee, Steve Scalise, has enough votes to actually get the official speakership if it goes to the House floor for a vote. One of those members, one of those Republicans in just the last hour telling me what comes next here is still a huge question mark. Watch.
I think that yesterday there was a strategic mistake. We should have stayed together until we got to somebody that had 217. The way the process was done, I think, was rushed.
So 16 House Republicans say they would vote against Steve Scalise. Steve Scalise can only afford to lose 4 of them and actually get the Speaker's gavel and get Congress functioning again, get the House of Representatives unparalyzed while this global crisis is unfolding. Our Hallie Vitale has been all over it on Capitol Hill. Hallie, I know that there have been at least one member that has said even the Lord Jesus could not get 217 votes right now. Congressman Menendez told me that's not happening, so they got to pick somebody, right? They got to pick Steve Scalise, somebody else. Where does this go? Because it doesn't. Is there a meeting on the books now? Do we know if they're coming back this week? Like, what's up?
Doesn't look like there's a meeting. I'm alone in this hallway.
Yeah, is anybody there?
Behind me, Hallie, is where Republicans No, because this is where they typically huddle. There had been rumors that maybe they were going to meet again tonight. I was just talking with one Republican lawmaker who literally came down here just for like a moment of peace and quiet because he knew that none of his colleagues were going to be down here. The mood is very tense, but at the same time, there is very little urgency. And I do think that what lawmakers said happened in the room and sort of is a punchline with the way that you say it of, even Jesus Christ himself couldn't get 217. That is what I was told was mentioned several times in the room behind me when they met for a few hours this afternoon. But that is also very much the reality. It's a joke, but it underscores what Republicans are dealing with right now, a pretty ungovernable, unmanageable group that is very far from 217. Nevertheless, you got to hand it to Steve Scalise for at least trying to sound optimistic. Listen to what he said.
We had a very constructive 2.5-hour-long meeting. Obviously, issues have come up over the last week about the whole process of how we get our conference back on track. But then individually, people have had questions, and I felt it would be much better if we did it in full view.
And certainly they did air a lot of those differences, and the word I heard a lot was grievances today, but there was no tangible action out of the grievance.
What's so interesting is you talk about one of the grievances coming from Congressman Zach Nunn, Hallie, Republican, first term, talking about how frustrated he felt, pointing to people like his work to try to get Americans safely home from Israel, the work of, making sure that people on the carrier in the, off the coast actually get paychecks. So if the government, shuts down in mid-November here, like expressing real frustration, not about the drama inside the Republican Party, but about the work that is simply not getting done here as it relates to Israel and this crisis.
Yeah, and Congressman Nunn is the one that voiced it in front of cameras, and I'll let us take a listen to that. But he's certainly not the only one that I've heard this frustration from. Watch.
But we spend more time getting together and actually electing a speaker. And at this point, I care less who that person is and more that they're willing to get policy to the floor.
Now, if there were more Zach Nunns who say, hey, I don't care who the speaker is, I just want to be able to get policy on the floor, we wouldn't be in this position right now, Hallie. The fact that for Scalise, there's a whip count against him that's anywhere between 15 and 20, that's a Scalise problem. But even as you look at the other people who could be speaker, Jim Jordan, maybe even Tom Cole, I mean, we've heard a few names floated. All of them have the same numbers problem. The stark reality is that no one here within this Republican conference can get to 217.
We will see what shakes loose, if anything, on that this week. Ali Vitale, thank you. In just the last hour, we've heard from a sitting senator facing a new federal charge against him. That is the already indicted Bob Menendez. After prosecutors alleged today he was basically working for our government and the Egyptians at the same time. A follow-up after he was hit with those corruption charges just a few weeks ago. In a statement, Menendez says the new charge flies in the face of his humanitarian work with Egypt and that his loyalties only lie with the U.S. Prosecutors are now saying Menendez accepted bribes. He took bribes, they say, and acted as a so-called foreign agent on behalf of Egypt while leading the Senate's Foreign Relations Committee. You're looking at these pictures? Well, these are pictures that the feds say are of Menendez and his wife with those Egyptians. The indictment says the senator provided, I'm quoting here, sensitive information and took other steps that secretly aided the government of Egypt. The new indictment means Menendez is now facing 4 federal charges and the possibility of potentially decades behind bars. NBC's Tom Winter is following this for us here. Tom, help us understand the broader context here. We let out, I know, a lot there, right, as far as nuts and bolts, but give us the reported analysis piece.
Yeah, I think what's happening here, Hallie, is prosecutors are continuing to kind of close in on Menendez and his activities, and they're often using his own words against him. For instance, he wrote a letter not too long ago asking for another former member of Congress to be investigated for failing to file as a foreign agent, and that's one of the components of the alleged crime here. He wrote a letter to the Attorney General's office asking for it, and prosecutors cited his own words and his own knowledge of this law, and then said, look, at the same point, as you're looking at these pictures, he's allegedly meeting with these Egyptian officials, and he's conspiring with a New Jersey businessman and his wife, who you're looking at on the left, to come together in order for her and the senator to get cash in exchange for helping out with weapons for Egypt, as well as for helping out on several other fronts, Hallie. So I think when you look at this in totality, they're painting a picture of a senator who was certainly working for others for his own benefit, they say.
These new allegations essentially claim, in sort of broad strokes, that Menendez was working for two governments at the same time. He's not resigning now. There is a renewed call, at least from some corners of the Senate, that he should step down. You know, this security clearance thing is still kind of a live ball, it seems. Is there any concern that you have heard in the course of your reporting that there is some kind of a threat that Menendez poses to national security here in the U.S.?
I think that remains to be seen, but I think given the types of things that are mentioned in this indictment, Hallie, prosecutors certainly have their eyes on those type of things, and this investigation is ongoing.
Tom Winter, thank you so much. Coming up here on the show, a lot more to get to, including the IOC suspending the Russian Olympic Committee over a move in Ukraine. But you could still see some of those athletes at the Paris Olympics. We'll explain in a minute. Plus, a big escalation in that UAW strike. What happened at Ford's biggest factory? Coming up. Israeli spy agencies have long been considered some of the best in the world, especially when it comes to their own backyard, the Middle East. That's one reason that so many experts are so stunned that Israel appeared to be so surprised by this terror attack carried out by Hamas. Here's Ken Delanian with a look at Israel's long history of sophisticated intel gathering.
These people may look like tourists, but according to Dubai police, they are Israeli intelligence operatives sneaking into a hotel to kill a senior Hamas leader. This wasn't the finest hour of the Mossad, as Israel's version of the CIA is known, because the alleged operation in 2010 was exposed to the world. But the ultimate goal was achieved. The Mossad and other Israeli intelligence agencies are known as some of the world's best, especially when it comes to spying in the Middle East, where Israel faces threats on all sides and from within. That's why it was so shocking that Hamas was able to launch a surprise attack that penetrated deep into Israeli territory and killed more than 1,300 of its citizens.
We did not receive any concrete warning, and they caught us off guard. And as Israelis, we've always prided ourselves on the excellence of our intelligence services.
From the founding of the country after World War II, Israeli intelligence built an aura of invincibility through a long history of risky and successful operations, from espionage to assassinations, such as the 1960 capture of high-ranking Nazi Adolf Eichmann, who was hiding in Argentina, or tracking down and killing many of the Palestinian militants who killed 11 Israeli athletes at the 1972 Munich Olympics.
Athletes of the village awoke to the tragic news.
The story portrayed in this Steven Spielberg film.
I give the signal by switching off the light.
And more recently, Mossad is believed to be behind the mysterious killings of Iranian scientists linked to that country's nuclear program, although not confirmed by NBC News.
Israeli intelligence was not just put in charge of collecting intelligence, but also translating that intelligence into way beyond enemy lines, daring operations.
Today, the Gaza Strip and the Palestinian areas of the West Bank are among the top intelligence gathering priorities of Israeli intel agencies. Former intelligence officials say they run elaborate spy networks, watch closely from overhead with drones and satellites, and monitor communications. Shin Bet, the domestic intelligence agency, even recruited the son of a Hamas founder who shared publicly that he spied for Israel for a decade. Along Israel's border with Gaza, the country built a sophisticated barrier full of electronic sensors. But Hamas was able to breach the so-called Iron Wall with drones, explosives, bulldozers, and even paragliders that apparently went unnoticed by Israel's vaunted spy agencies.
How come they didn't know? That's a question yet to be answered.
Ken Delanian is joining us now. Ken, and that is such a fascinating look, I think, at Mossad and at these intel agencies. Bring us to sort of the current moment here. What can they do now, right? Like, we're obviously not going to know what their operations are for obvious reasons, but talk us through it.
Well, they're going to play a key role in this war in finding targets and prepping the battlefield, Hallie. But one of the experts you saw there, Ronan Bergman, wrote a book about Mossad called Rise and Kill First. And he reported that Israel has assassinated more people since World War II than any other country. So if Hamas leaders go anywhere in the world where they are exposed, you can expect that Israel will target them.
Ken Delanian, thank you so much for bringing us that reporting. I want to get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, more than 70 million Americans will see their Social Security benefits go up by just about 3% next year. That adds about $50 a month to the average retirement check. That is well below this year's increase. These adjustments happen every year to try to keep up with inflation. Number 2, a lot of damage in Florida today after at least one tornado and multiple storms hit parts of the state. Officials there say some people have just catastrophic loss to property. You can see trees are down, cars crushed. Fortunately, at this point, officials say nobody's been hurt. Number 3, the UAW, that United Auto Workers strike, is expanding, this time to a Ford plant in Kentucky, where thousands of union members walked off the job. It's a big deal because it was kind of a surprise. This plant is really profitable. It generates something like $25 billion every year. Ford responded, saying this move was grossly irresponsible, their words. Number 4, if you're wondering who won that $1.73 billion Powerball jackpot, I'm telling you, it wasn't you. If you're watching this show, if you are watching the show and you won, and you're the person in California who won, like, call me. But I'm guessing it wasn't you. Anyways, the person who won lives in California. I'm sorry if you don't, but better luck next time, I guess. $700 million. That's what that person's taking home. Not bad. Number 5, talks between striking Hollywood actors and studios are suspended today. The two sides are fighting over a bunch of things like streaming revenue, the use of AI. You know that SAG, after the actors have been on strike since mid-July. Hollywood writers are back to work. They just, a couple days ago, approved a contract that ended their strike, but the actors still have not done the same. We'll see how it goes. When we come back, a lot more to get to, including our top story, that war between Israel and Hamas. You're going to hear the story, the incredible story of a young woman who went face-to-face with Hamas gunmen at the music festival in southern Israel. Her conversation with our producer next in tonight's Backstory. Time now to get the backstory, our behind-the-scenes look at how a story comes together and how it fits into our bigger picture. And tonight, we're looking at a young woman, a festival organizer who came face-to-face with Hamas terrorists at the music festival, where something like 260 people were killed. Noah Beer telling our NBC News senior investigative producer Anna Schechter the thumping of the music was so loud she couldn't hear the bombs going off at first. She could see them, but thought they were fireworks. Sharing the horrific scene she saw as she ran away, saying, and I'm quoting here, "I saw 2 terrorists waiting for me to drive, so I just stepped on the gas." Anna Schechter is joining us now. Anna, talk to us about how you connected with Noah and how she was talking with you about this absolutely nightmare that she lived through.
Thanks so much for having me, Hallie. So Noah was so candid with me, and I'm just so grateful to her because she gave the fullest account of what happened in those horrific moments after the attack. And just to give a shout out to all the amazing bookers and social news gathering teams at NBC. They have been feeding me nonstop phone numbers of relatives, friends of relatives, friends of friends, people that they might have seen on social media. And so I've just been dialing every number, and I just got so lucky to meet Noah on Sunday, actually. So really the day after the attack, and she was so raw and almost stunned, like she hadn't started to process the trauma yet. So she gave me her story just in full. And you were just describing as she actually was able to get to her car because she was parked in the VIP area because she was one of the organizers. She brought a Hungarian DJ who had flown in the night of the party. She picked him up at the Tel Aviv airport, got down to the festival, and after his set, they decided to stay on in the morning. She said it was just a great time, a great vibe, and that's when she saw what looked like fireworks, and then security started to say, you know, everybody get down, and she told the Hungarian DJ, because he's not Israeli, he's not used to rockets, and she and her friends, they all know to get down and take cover. But she thought it was just normal rocket fire. She didn't realize the extent of this horrific, brutal attack. So she gets in the car with her friend, the DJ, and drives off. And she just thanks God that she was using her boss's Jeep because it was much more secure than her own vehicle. And she saw some of her friends and some other guys who were at the festival go off into a bomb shelter on the side of the road, and that turned out to be, unfortunately, deadly for many of them, and she kept driving. And that's when she drove right into the terrorists. And I think we have a quote to put up on screen. She said, "They looked me straight in the eye, and they saw terror in my eyes." And she said it a little bit more explicitly, but that they did not care. And she described them as just bloodthirsty people shooting indiscriminately. They didn't care about her fear. They didn't care about anything. And there's this harrowing moment she describes where the car got stuck in reverse and she couldn't move the car because it wasn't hers, and she was just figuring out the buttons, and miraculously she's able to drive off and get the people in the back of her car who were shot and wounded to the hospital, and they all survived.
So she had picked up people? She had picked up people that
yes.
she had seen as she was escaping, Anna?
As she was driving the car, there was like this massive traffic jam, and so she opened the car door. She saw someone lying on the ground from a motorcycle. She thought it was a traffic accident, and her thought was, oh, let me go help. And then she started hearing bullets, and the bullets were flying over her head, and she said to the DJ, get down, get behind the car door because it's metal. And there were guys kind of crawling on the ground. She just shoved 3 guys that she didn't know in the back of her car. Unfortunately, they were all wounded by gunshots. But she was able to get them to safety. So she's a true hero.
It is just an incredible story of heroism, Anna, in just what has been a landscape from hell, frankly, for so many of those people living in Israel and those survivors. Anna Schechter, thank you for bringing us those stories. So important to tell them. We appreciate you doing that.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. To some of the other international stories we've been following today, because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all. Our teams around the world have done it for you. Here's some of what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of Afghanistan, more than 90% of the people killed in an earthquake there last week were women and children, according to the UN, which says that's because women and kids were more likely to have been inside their homes when the quake happened. It absolutely demolished pretty much everything in a western province, killing more than 2,000 people. In Switzerland, the International Olympic Committee just decided to suspend Russia's Olympic Committee. Why? Because Russia tried to start up sports councils in 4 regions in eastern Ukraine. There's been a lot of pressure on the IOC to totally ban athletes from Russia from the Paris Olympics next summer. And out of England, something that hasn't been seen in something like 400 years in the UK, environmental groups releasing 5 beavers into the woods in West London as part of a program to try to boost biodiversity. The beavers had been hunted to extinction there centuries ago, but this particular family was brought down from Scotland, an adult pair and their 3 kits. They're hoping that the beavers' dam building could help with flooding in the area. Coming up here on the show, some new trouble tonight for Elon Musk's X and potentially some other social media platforms. What the European Commission says it's investigating next. Later today, the European Commission is officially launching an investigation into X, what used to be Twitter, to see if it actually complies with its rules on harmful content, illegal content in the middle of this Israel-Hamas war. That request coming not long after X's CEO said that it removed or labeled tens of thousands of pieces of content, meaning they flagged it, and removed hundreds of Hamas-affiliated accounts. The EU is also sending the same unofficial warning to the CEOs of Meta and TikTok. They haven't directly addressed those warnings. I want to bring in NBC's tech correspondent, Jake Board. So, Jake, this goes to this issue that you and I have been talking about here since this war erupted after the terror attack against Israel on Saturday, which is so much misinformation, disinformation, bad information on these platforms. And yet, at this moment, getting real information in real time can be so critical to the people living in this region here. It is almost an impossible thing to handle if these companies aren't staffed or equipped or able to keep up with the bad info.
That's absolutely right, Hallie. I mean, if you are feeling overwhelmed by the amount of misinformation and terrible imagery coming across social media right now, well, you are not alone. Even some of the most veteran researchers who look at misinformation and what experts call information pollution say this is as bad as they have ever seen it. I spoke to Claire Wardle, just a foundational researcher, one of the very first people to study misinformation in this context, and she says that it's simply because of the changing landscape of social media and the fact that these platforms just don't seem to be up to the task that we are all being besieged in this way. Have a listen.
Right now, I think the challenge is we've never had this many platforms in such a confusing situation with, to be totally honest, platforms that just aren't up to the job. They're just not able to do the necessary work.
I mean, this is really the situation that we are in at the moment, Hallie, is just this feeling of being absolutely overwhelmed. You combine, the cutbacks at a lot of these companies when it came to the trust and safety teams that they had on board, and the fact that so much is being pushed out across social media, beginning in places like Telegram, the preferred platform of Hamas, and then it just spreads like wildfire from there. So just, a tidal wave of terrible imagery, terrible content, in some cases just misinformation, in some cases disinformation, and at the very least, even when it's accurate, just terrible to look at.
There was also, even before this war started, the concern about the rise in anti-Semitism that we've seen in the United States and the way that X specifically was handling some of that, right?
That's absolutely right. Elon Musk went on a long rant right after he acquired Twitter, responding to charges that anti-Semitic posts had increased as much as they had. And, over and over again, he blamed the Anti-Defamation League. They today are pointing out that there is so much graphic video moving across X at the moment. Premium subscribers, according to a new research report out by the Tech Transparency Project, are being able to post things directly from Hamas accounts with the Hamas logo on them. They say, we implore social media platforms to take this stuff down in their statement. But, it's also important to point out here, right, this does not serve Palestinians as well. There is also terrible misinformation moving out across them. And in the coming days, we're going to need as much accurate social media as we can to keep track of what goes on in Gaza and what happens to the Palestinians. So it's really a needle that we have to thread here, and it doesn't seem anybody's up to that task yet.
Jake Ward, thank you very much. Still to come here on the show, you are looking at live pictures, or you're about to be, at Columbia University, which closed down its campus to the public today over protests related to the war. We got more on that coming up next. We'll take you there. Right now, a pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian rally is just starting to wrap up at Columbia University after the campus shut down to the public today, a day after an Israeli student was beaten in front of a library on campus. It comes as some are calling on schools to try to protect students who have different views related to this war. The former Harvard president Larry Summers, who came out earlier this week criticizing a letter signed by 35 campus organizations placing blame on Israel for the Hamas terror attack, is now raising the caution flag on not unfairly outing pro-Palestinian students, in his view. This is after what's called a doxing truck, or that's what they called it, showed up on Harvard's campus. It's basically these digital billboards that show the names and pictures of students who allegedly signed that controversial letter. George Solis is live for us at Columbia there. George, talk us through what you're seeing tonight at that school.
Yeah, good evening, Hallie. Things very peaceful here for the moment. You can actually see the literal divide of the pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian protesters. Take a look at what's happening right now. The students here that have been organizing, they've been closing this off to the media. They haven't allowed us to go in, but they are now lying here on the grass. They are now starting to get up. We're told that this is going to wrap up here within the next few minutes or so, and then they're going to peacefully disperse. Again, there has been no hiccups here between the two sides, maybe a little bit of a exchange of words here and there, but both students groups just sort of keeping to their own with their own messages here, the pro-Palestinian side and then the pro-Israeli side. We had a chance to talk to some students on both sides who obviously are weighing in on this very polarizing topic, many of them saying they want their voices heard, they want their message heard, they really don't appreciate any of the violence and some of the rhetoric that has been spread out there at this moment. But again, you can hear the chants here, Free Palestine, and the pro-Israeli side staying quiet through much of this, Hallie. And again, they're on the move again. We're not quite sure how they're going to disperse. We're just told they're going to do it in a way to avoid any other conflict here that may arise. I do want to quickly play some of the sound from some of the interviews we did with some of the students. Take a listen.
Even if I didn't have family, I think I'd still make it down here. It's a decent thing to do. There's not a Jew in the world that can't say that there's a connection of them who's affected.
Yeah, Hallie, one thing I also want to note is a lot of the students here on the pro-Palestinian side have been wearing face masks, and a lot of them have been refusing to speak with us. A lot of them concerned over those doxing concerns that some of their images or likenesses may be spread or possibly be used for any type of misinformation. At least that's what they've been told here by some of the student organizers. So speaking to them has actually been quite challenging.
Well, you make this point about this issue of so-called doxing here. We talked about that controversial Harvard letter signed by pro-Palestinian groups placing the blame for the Hamas terror attack on the shoulders of Israel here. There have been some CEOs that have suggested that names should be released, right? Not just these student groups, but the actual names of people in those groups should be released so that these companies could maybe blacklist them, not hire them. What else do you know about sort of the fallout from that piece of it?
Yeah, obviously, and that's starting to make waves, right? I mean, people put on a list here, obviously, that's not a good message. It's not something that is sitting well with a lot of members of the community. One thing we want to do is put up that statement that was put out by that student group. It says, "We, the undersigned student organization, hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all the unfolding violence. Today's events did not occur in a vacuum. For the last 2 decades, millions of Palestinians in Gaza have been forced to live in an open-air prison." And some of the backlash has been pretty swift, as some of those student organizations there, Hallie, have actually withdrawn their names from that list. But obviously, the sentiment, the idea of putting people's name on a list, not sitting well with a lot of people, and already a very sensitive subject, Hallie.
George Solis, live for us there in New York. George, thank you. That does it for us for this hour here on the show. We've got a lot more coverage picking up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.